We always felt like this area of Alachua County had a burden and a call for the people that were unsaved, the ones that didn't know the Lord. There's a lot of churches that reached out to people that already knew God and were real churchy type churches, and we always knew that there was something here that we needed to have something more for the people that didn't know the Lord, and that was always in our heart because we weren't raised in church.
So we started over at the Swick House. It was where we had our first service. And Lake City would send some of their pastoral staff down at that time to, preach for us that Sunday. And the first was Dustin. He came down, Dustin Busker, came down to speak for us and preached that day. And then we had, our next service, Mark was actually coming to preach. And, I've known Mark for a long time, and there was just something different.
In 2006, we were still in Lake City, where my brother and I had planted a church for the previous 8 years. The church had really done well. It was growing incredibly, and everything was great. We were planting churches out of our church, and there was plenty of ministry to be done. We enjoyed working together. It was a wonderful benefit for both of us. We both shared pulpit time. It was just it was a great time. But about 2006, we just started to feel like something was drying up there, like God had something next. Now, we had already been through this twice before, so we kind of knew what the feeling was. We kind of knew, I knew what it really started to feel like when God began to slowly transition you out. It's unmistakable once you've been through it a couple of times. I didn't know what that meant. At the time, we had started Vital Vision, which was a leadership development group that I've been doing now for a while, and it was really blowing up and doing well. I was teaching leadership, I was consulting for churches, doing that kind of stuff, so I felt like that feeling that I had was probably going to be more in the vein of the leadership style that God had raised me up to do. But in fact, it wasn't. There were a couple of opportunities that we had to pastor other churches, and we prayed about them and never felt like that was what the Lord wanted us to do. We just never felt like that was right. But when Alachua came up, my brother and I talked about replanting a church there, planting a church there, and we began to look for a pastor to go and do that. And as we began to look, we asked guys, we interviewed guys, people that we thought would fit the area, and none of those guys ever felt like it was the call of God. So in the course of the conversation, we just, one day my brother and I were talking, and he just looked at me, and I had already begun to kind of think this way, but I had never really verbalized it. And my brother just looked at me and said, what about you? Because we had been very open about what was going on with me. He knew what was going on with me. We knew, what that was. We always had a very clear line of communication. So when we started to talk about this, we knew that it was kind of crazy because we didn't believe it was going to look like that.
If you know anything about the Lake City Church, some people can get comfortable where they're at. And having that many people in Lake City, it would be hard for a man to make the decision with his family to leave that and come to a little old church at the Swick House in Alachua with not a whole lot of people.
When Mark came home and we started talking about this literally in that 1 week, it just all shifted, it all changed, and we went from, being on staff to being pastors ourselves, and was absolutely not on our radar, wasn't on my radar. So it was exciting for me, even though, we knew we were going basically, starting over all over again. We'd already done that for 10 years. But it was exciting because I saw where it could go. I saw what the church could be.
Just always knew. God just has that way of completely confirming His will for your life. And so we knew immediately that it was something that we had to do.
So when Mark and I, made the decision and we knew we were going down to Alachua, obviously, before we told anybody, the first people that I went to tell was my mom and dad. So I remember driving to their house that day, and I think my dad was out in the yard, and I asked him to come up to the house. I knew Mom was in the house, and they sat down, and I told them I had something to tell them, and I'm sure they didn't have a clue what I was getting ready to say. And I just told them, they knew about Alachua, they knew about everything, and I said, Mark and I are going to go and pastor this church. And as soon as I said it, my dad just got this look on his face that...
I said, well, y'all deserve more than this. And the reason I said that wasn't nothing negative about the people in Alachua.
We did think that they deserved more than this, but we were looking at that from the standpoint of parents. There was nothing spiritual about thinking about that at all.
It was that Mark and Tina and Lonnie, which is Mark's brother, people don't know it, and me and Sherry and some more people basically started Christ Central in Lake City. And Mark worked his off for I don't know how many years building the church, and it grew. And when we finally did build the church, bought some property and built the church, it just exploded, and then went from a couple hundred to 600 or 700. And Mark and Tina giving that up to come down here with 20 or 30 people, starting all over. I said, they're financially well off because they were doing well up there, and coming down here starting from nothing, it bothered me, because that was my daughter, so that bothered me.
I told him, I said, we're not going to 30 people. That's not what I see. I see a big church with a big vision. We are not going to something small. It may be small now, but one day it is going to be great.
And when Mark poured out his heart to us that he was coming and it was really a calling, then our next reaction was, well, you do want us to go with you? And of course, Tina said, yeah, of course we want you to come.
When we stood up that day, it was sad when we announced to the church that, we were leaving. We had been with these people for 10 years. A lot of these people I had been with my entire life because I had grew up in a church that a lot of these people attended.
And it was a shock to them. It was a shock to us. But the people were so supportive, and we sat around for 3 hours and just loved on people and cried with people and hugged people, and we still have many wonderful relationships with those people. But they were excited because they knew that we had heard from the Lord. We knew that we had heard from the Lord.
We were walking away from that and going to a new group of people that I don't even know. We knew a couple of them, but as far as that, we didn't have a relationship with them. So it was exciting to go build this relationship. So we left this one, church that we'd been at all these years, drove down to Alachua.
And met with 20 people in a room. I think we had some pictures of that moment where we just sat in the Swick house in this living room and just told the people that we were coming to plant a church and start a church and to pastor this church, and we were going to do something great and God was going to be in it.
We didn't know that we were going to get such a blessing to have Pastor Mark come. We couldn't believe that God would bless us so much with such an amazing pastor.
I remember getting in the car that day when it was all over and driving away, when it really kind of hit me, because then it had not sunk in. But when we got on the interstate driving back towards Lake City to our home, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Dear God, man, what are we doing, really? What are we doing? And we went down with no land, no building, a microscopic handful of people, and all we had was a dream and God. When we decided to do this, it was 2008. Well, I had no idea what was going on in 2008. I don't think that anybody really did. Everybody knew that the economy was getting a little bit tighter, but nobody could anticipate what was going to happen in 2008. Of course, we all know, if you own a home or own property, we all know what happened in 2008. We all lost equity in our homes. The economy tanked. It was the whole bailout situation. Later, I had read in Forbes magazine that the actual bubble burst of our economy in March of 2008. Our first Sunday was the last Sunday of April in 2008. We literally planted a church in probably one of the worst times that you could ever have scheduled to plant a church. We didn't know what was going on. In fact, no one could really diagnose what happened in 2008. It was like a year later before people could backtrack and say, this is where it all went down. This is where it happened.
Well, for us, our journey with CCA began in 2008. We were serving at another church in Alabama. I was in college. We had been married for a year, and May was coming around, graduation for me, and we knew that God was leading us away from where we were, and we were trying to figure out what we were supposed to do next. And really, all this time, we had been talking to Mark, and he was trying to help us find a place that we could serve after I graduated. And it was about in May when he called us and said, hey, I'm leaving where I'm at, Christ Central Lake City, and I'm going to Alachua. I really didn't even know where Alachua was. And he said, hey, do you want to join with us?
They started up Crave at a place downtown Gainesville, this bar, and it was Tuesday night. Obviously the bar was closed for business, but we were able to meet there and stuff. The guy who owned it was really cool and about that. So the first night, Maggie and I went there and with a couple other friends of ours and just, started really this journey in that moment of rediscovering God. We had grown up in church and stuff, so we knew about God. We knew about religion, but we didn't really know a whole lot about relationship with Jesus, so that kind of started this journey for us moving towards that.
I just really felt like this is a time of growth for me, growing spiritually and really getting to know God. I'd went to church before, but this was a kind of a time where my faith became my own.
I grew up in a Catholic church and I was still going at the time, and so it was pretty difficult because they were talking about having a relationship with Jesus, and it was more that's not how I was taught. It was more of things that you have to do to connect with God. And so whenever I started going, it started opening up my eyes, and I'm like, okay, what way is right? And so it took me on a journey of finding what I believed instead of what I was taught.
Crave helped us to really just take God out of that box and break down those walls and help us to see Jesus in a completely different light that we had never even experienced or never known before.
Donnie was a game changer for our church. One of the most amazing guys I've ever met. His personality, his charisma, his excitement level, you'd never meet somebody more positive than him. And so when we had a change in our worship leader position, Donnie was asked to come on and to take over for a while, and he began with us at Mabane and journeyed with us actually to Yrs Elementary.
Mark would always ask him, are you going to commit? Are we going to come on full time? And Donnie would never commit to him. He would always say, no, I'm not ready for that, or I don't want to do that right now. But he just wanted to develop people to take over his job, take his position. And so that's really where Robbie came into play. Robbie started helping out with the worship team with Donnie.
I remember the first time I ever went to any rehearsal for Sunday morning was the first one Donnie was ever at. And I remember going there and just kind of bringing my guitar and just like, hey man, can I be a part of this? And he's like, yeah, what do you do? And I kind of play guitar. I'm been leading at the youth and stuff, and so I started serving in the band and just kind of playing acoustic, just figuring out how to play acoustic as I went. If it was a song I didn't know a certain chord for, I would be Googling it real quick or looking up on YouTube how to play this chord so I could play this song with him. He kind of took me under his wing and really started to pour into me and to teach me and train me. I asked him if he would and if he would just start showing me different things and teach me different instruments and how to lead, how to play, how to sing, how to do all this stuff. Because in my mind it was, all right, if this is something I feel like God's calling me to, then I need to give it 110%. I need to know as much as I can about it.
So in 2011, I think it was towards the end, Mark brought me into his office one day and asked if I would teach a 4th and 5th grade class on Sunday mornings. And at first, I thought kids. I don't know about kids. I don't have kids of my own. I'm not married. I don't really know about these kids. But as I started talking to them, I saw an opportunity, and that was to teach these 4th and 5th graders and just take what Mark, being the pastor, has kind of entrusted to me. And I have an opportunity to really teach them about God and what that means, and and just really use that and to kind of start my ministry at CCA. And my girlfriend at the time, Erica, was kind of helping me, and so she would come on Sunday mornings and help with the kids. But one day, Pastor Mark called me in his office, and he asked me if I wanted to lead all of the kids on Sunday mornings. And so it was just a really exciting time for me to get that opportunity. And And so it was just such a joy being able to teach them. And now my wife and I are married, and we're expecting our first child. And so it's just been an incredible time the last year and a half or so, being able to teach kids and just really see them grow in their faith and what it means to develop healthy families and what that looks like.
So our very first service we had in the Swick House, which was the same living room that we announced that we were coming down there to be on staff. And my mom and dad came with us that day and some other people. And so we made the announcement. We had a prior commitment the very next Sunday, so we couldn't start that next Sunday. So it was the very next Sunday, which was the last Sunday of April, that we had our very first service there in the Swick House. And then from there we were able to move into the middle school, Mabane Middle School.
We would have these conversations in staff because we were so new and we were so excited about our church, and we knew that our church was excited about our church. We kept talking about, there's no way that in a year or in 2 years that we're not just going to completely blow up.
There was an excitement when we first got going, and people were buying in. We had added some staff and brought some people in with us to help shoulder the load, and it was wonderful. But when we hit 2009, we had some expectations, and we had some things that we expected to see, we wanted God to do. And in 2009, it just absolutely stalled. It fell flat, and we didn't grow at all. And I mean, we're in a 400-seat auditorium with maybe 60 adults in the room. I just saw something completely different. I believe that by that time that we would have tripled or quadrupled, and I just had absolutely no problem believing that we were going to be at a completely different stage, and in fact we weren't. And not only were we not there, we weren't growing really at all.
It was in that year that a lot of the things that people would say to us when we first started to haunt us. Alachua is a name for sinkhole, and so people would say, you can't start a church in a sinkhole, and it's impossible to start a church in Alachua. People have tried and failed many times, and so those things kind of started to haunt us. We just really had to get on our knees and say, all right, God, you called us here. We're going to stay here. We're going to be here, and we're going to do whatever it takes.
What exactly are we here to do? What exactly is this supposed to be? What exactly is this supposed to look like? Who really are we? And so I would close the door and I would spend hours and hours and hours meditating, thinking, praying, reading the Bible. I was just looking for answers. And one day when we finally got together, we were in a staff meeting, and we had came across Luke chapter 10, and we had read it in a very unique way. And we were talking about simple church and being simple, and what is it that God is calling it, and what are the dangers of distractions and all of that we came up with out of Luke chapter 10. This simple concept that was laid out in Scripture, where Jesus is in this dialogue with this young Jewish lawyer, and he basically tells him, you got to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. You got to love your neighbor as yourself. And then in that same moment, he gives him the great parable of the Great Samaritan, the Good Samaritan. And he laid out for him three very simple things: love God, love people, and serve others. And he said, if you do this, you are fulfilling the law. And in this, you find eternal life. It's the secret to what I've put you on this planet to do. And when we read that, it completely blew up in our spirits.
It really changed the game for CCA, because it took us from just having church to really wanting to be the church.
It really caught on, and it really became the defining vision for CCA, and it is something that we say, describes us in every way.
Mm-hmm. It became pretty much our war cry. I mean, as soon as we took that, we had that message in January. It was a 4-week series. You could just feel the momentum in the people. You could feel the shift and the change in the mindset. after that series, in January, you could pretty much go up to anybody in our church and say, hey, what are you guys here for? What is CCA here for? And they would immediately say, love God, love people, serve others.
And it was in that moment that I could feel while I was preaching for the first time in a year, it all made sense. I had preached for so long, what seemed like so long, lost, that I stood up and there was a certainty in my voice. And not only did I feel it, I could feel the people reaching back and grabbing it. And for the first time, they were like, yes, this is it. This is who we are. This is what we're going to do.
During that time that we were there was 3 different principals that came in. We started with a principal. She was great, good Christian lady, excited for us to be in there, worked with us as much as possible. And then we had 2 more principals come in, and as soon as, that next principal would come in, we'd introduce ourselves, build that relationship, let them know how thankful we are that they're allowing us to be there. But when that last principal came in, Mark and I drove over there, made an appointment, wanted to go sit down, build a relationship with her, introduce ourselves, do the whole thing again. And our contract was getting ready to be renewed. So we were going to see if we could extend that contract some more.
In 2 months.
Right. So there's nowhere in Alachua. There's not a lot of empty buildings that you can just go in and, have a church set up.
House even 100 people, which is where we were about then.
And we had already been looking, and it just, there was nothing. So Mark and I walked in, we met her, shook her hand, sat down, and literally she opened up her file, our file, opened it up and said, okay, here's your end date. No pleasantries, no, introducing yourself, getting to know each other, none of that.
I always tried to loosen her up, and she just never did.
None of that. She said, here's your end date. You need to be making plans. You got to be out here by that date.
We had never even looked over at Alachua Elementary simply because it was an elementary school and it was small, and I knew they didn't have an auditorium. So, I never had went over there and even talked with the principal at all because there wasn't an auditorium there that would seat the people. So, but in absolute, complete desperation, we just drove over there just to see, because I told Tina, I said, if there's a big room, for crying out loud, if there's just if we could clear out a bunch of, even school desks out of a, maybe some area where they kind of meet with the teachers or whatever, is there anywhere? So we walked over we drove over and met with Mr. Brandenburg, and he welcomed us with open arms, and he told us flat out, we don't have an auditorium, there's no place like that, but what we do have is a cafeteria. We walked into that cafeteria and saw this little bitty stage on one end and this little terrazzo floor, and all I did was I walked immediately over to the wall, and I walked off the width of the wall, and I looked at Tina and I said, it will work. It will stink, but it will work. And so we brought the staff over and looked at it.
So I remember the first time we went to Alachua Elementary School, and we were so excited. We're moving to this new facility, and what's it gonna be? What's it gonna be like? How are we gonna use this? And the first time we walked in and we looked at the lunchroom, and it's like, man, this place is rough. And so we spent the whole few hours cleaning blinds and straightening, and we put a lot of work into that first day before we actually moved in.
And just to be honest with you, I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And when we walked in, it was a cafeteria. You could just imagine all these little kids, just being in there, food everywhere. The stage was not a stage, and it was just, it just wasn't what we had. We had an amazing thing at Mabane, and we just felt like we were going backwards.
We were entering into another level of portable church that we had not yet been accustomed to. So every week that we were going in, it was an hour and a half, 2 hour setup. The stress on the volunteers was incredible. We had to go in and literally tear out 20 cafeteria tables, take everything down, then put everything up. Our seats, 250 chairs, our sound system, run our snake, put up our instruments, hang our projectors, put up our screens, put up all of our signage out, everything. One of my favorite things is there was this big vending machine in the corner, and right in the middle of one of a key point while you're preaching your guts out, it would just, the generator would kick on. And everybody sitting on that side of the room would just go. And they would look at it. It was distracting. It was terrible. And we had to actually build this massive box, this huge 3,000 felt like pound box to go around this vending machine to try to dull the sound of that. It was just it was an awesome time. It was crazy. It was in those moments that we really began to forge the heartbeat of our church.
Even though it wasn't the most prettiest place, and it was a cafeteria. That ability to be so close to each other. I mean, we became, I would say, a more of a family, during that time, and we just became more confident in each other, and we just knew we were on this journey together, and that Christ was leading us, and that we were doing something, we were making an impact.
I think Kaylee one Sunday, I believe, she's like, would you be interested in cleaning the bathrooms on Sunday mornings for me? Because I have all this stuff, and it'd take a load off of me. And I was like, sure, yeah, because I always used to clean homes for different individuals back in Lake City, so that was cool. And so I eventually named the team So Fresh and So Clean Team, and
clean.
yeah, it was a added little gooby gobbies on the counter. So it was really cool. So that's where I started serving at CCA.
Should we explain what gooby gobbies mean? No, just roll with it. Gooby gobbies.
Gooby gobbies are little, what are they?
Knickknacks.
That's
Little added
okay.
things.
Gooby gobbies are little touches to the bathroom, such as
Touches
soaps
of
and
awesomeness.
lotions and things like that.
And in that time, we grew probably
We grew.
120, 130 extra people.
Yep.
We grew. Our volunteer base grew. Our teams got fortified. Every time we had a guest speaker come in while we were there, they would look around and they would just be completely amazed that we grew.
Lo and behold, what we found out is that there were people at CCA at that time who believed in souls and believed in what God was doing. We would go to lunch with people that I would have to come in periodically and speak for us, and they would not say anything, of course, during service because they were being, kind. They were grateful to be there. But at lunch, when it was just us, they would go, "I've never seen anything this bad before." I mean, this is the worst facility. This is the worst place that you could ever have to hold a church, and they would just be blown away at how God was growing the church and how the people were giving and how the people were working. And what they all ended their conversations by saying was, "Man, this is one of the healthiest churches that I've ever seen." Because you don't measure the true health of a church by its size. You measure the health of a church by the way people serve and by the way people give, by the way that they are selfless in the way that they give to the work of God. And I'd put CCA up with any church I've ever been around, ever. In 2011, we just hit another gear. People began to really respond to that vision, and we saw a very significant amount of growth in that 2011 time. And we began to reach out into the community in a new way, in a fresh way. Because the thing that I always said was, we cannot have love God, love people, and serve others. And we can't put it on bulletins, we can't put it on signs and not live it. We can't just say it, everybody says it, we've got to live it. And so we just really began to reach out into the community and we said we're going to be a church not just in the community, we're going to be a church for the community. And that's a vast difference and a major shift. And once we began to do that, people began to just flock to the church. So it was the year that we really started thinking about doing egg drop. We had heard about this church in Carolina that had done it and the amazing results, and we said this is an amazing thing that we can do and not ask the community for anything.
We just knew that if we could do something that crazy, that we could really, draw some attention to our community, draw some attention to our church, and ultimately connect people to Jesus. And so I think it was really egg drop that really kind of, I would almost say, we were able to find our place in our community. That's when people started hearing about our church. They still to this day, I mean, people, when you say egg drop, they think of the bunny and think of the helicopter and all that stuff. But that year it was definitely a hot air balloon,
and it didn't even get to go up because of the wind.
Yeah, it crashed and burned, but it didn't matter. It was still an amazing event. 2,000 people came out. This wasn't just your neighborhood egg hunt. This was big, and it was really a game changer for us and for our church.
Regionally, our church really being known as more than just a church in the community. It was a church for the community, and people began to really take notice of the way that we ministered and did things to just serve people. We didn't ask for anything in return. We just want to serve and give as much as we possibly can, and it's been in that people have really come and responded to the church and found Christ.
At the end of Egg Drop, that first year that we did it, we knew the city did an Easter egg hunt every year. They had done it for 25, 26 years. Hal Brady, the rec department, had done his Easter egg hunt, and when they came out that day, because ours was on different days than theirs, so they came to
We didn't
ours.
want to compete with them. We just
Exactly.
wanted to
So we
add
did it.
something
We
different.
did it on a completely different day because we didn't want to detract from theirs. And when they came and saw the magnitude of it, I was just always amazed that we were a church at that time, maybe almost 200. I don't think we were running 200 at the time. So this seemingly small church to put on this event that almost 2,000 people that do not even know us would drive to Alachua, to this piece of property where there's nothing, and take their kids to this. It just blew me away that many people responded that year. So when the city officials came, they saw it, they said, you know what, let's partner with them next year. Let's discontinue what we do and partner with Christ Central. And they have both years since, and it's just been an incredible partnership. They have helped us in ways with things that have just been amazing.
CCA has really enhanced the citizens and the politicians because Pastor Mark Johns and his parishioners and church members have really got involved in events and activities that were sponsored by the city, as well as show not a show of force in a negative way, but a positive way. They can, when you ask CCA to come out, they come out and support any program, the art festival, the Halloween on Main Street, and so forth. Anything that the city of Alachua is doing, and we ask for assistance and a partnership, CCA will go way and beyond.
Being out in the community and people who don't even go to your church, just knowing like, hey, I know about your church and y'all are doing some incredible things. It's cool because it's the church being the church and it's serving others, and they know like CCA is a place where we're going to serve others.
It was the Alachua Christmas Parade, and we were there with our son Christian, and there was this float that came on by, and it was playing some heavy metal Christmas music, and Tommy's like, I want to go to that church. And we had been attending a different church for a short time and kind of looking for a church family.
Yeah, I'd seen a girl in the parade that I went to work with, and I'd asked her, I'm like, do you guys really rock out like that at school or at church? And she's like, yeah, we got a full band and everything, so I thought that was pretty cool.
We first heard about CCA about 4 years ago. We were at Trick or Treat on Main Street, and when we got home, we had the little card from the little candy bag and kind of held on to it for a couple months, and we talked about it, and nothing really happened until the following year. We were back at Trick or Treat on Main Street, and we got another card, and Nico had been asking about attending a church or finding a church for us to go to as a family, and something, sort of a youth group for him to connect with.
I had wanted to attend church for a little while and stuff, and so I felt really alone and stuff, and that none of my friends really cared about me and stuff, and so I wanted to go to church, and so I searched the web, and I happened to see CCA's website, and so I went for the very first time in, I think, January or February 2 years ago.
CCA has made a tremendous impact on the Alachua community. I've been chief 5 years, been a hometown resident, grew up and raised here, and to see a religious or a organization such as CCA come in and not talk about it but be about it. There are people of action.
2011, we really started to see some fruit of the people that we had been investing in, and we started seeing people, even though we were packed out at this, smelly cafeteria, and we were having to, do all the setup and breakdown, people were still just flocking to our church and completely transforming their lives and feeling this love of God through our people and through the message that was being shared. And so we were really able to start seeing so many people come to meet Jesus for the first time, and marriages saved and finances restored and all of that. And so it was really cool to see that.
First heard about CCA, I think it was from my girlfriend at the time, Kim. She was given a flyer, and it was really, at that time I don't think either one of us were in church very much, and it was one of those things we were curious, and I don't think there was any, at that point we were thinking about marriage too, and I don't think anything would have been right in our lives without God. And obviously we were going through our own issues at the time, and it was tough because those issues were forcing us apart, mainly due to my part, mainly due to me. But, when she got that flyer, that was her first time coming. And then she invited me. I had already been at a church, but it wasn't the same. I wasn't really feeling love there. I just was going just so I can kind of get my gold star on the wall. So I figured it was probably time for a change at that point.
It's really led me to a deeper relationship with God and with Christ. I didn't really know, what it meant to be a Christian before CCA. I grew up in the church and didn't really have a full idea, though. It's just really broadened and deepened my understanding of Christianity and helped me, to be a better father and to bring our family closer together.
It's incredible. Just my walk with God has strengthened. Our marriage has strengthened. I think the core of our family has just grown so strong. And we're able to share that with other friends and family members, and people almost can see it on our faces, I think, sometimes, and want to ask what's different, and we will tell them. And it's from this church. It's from CCA.
It feels like sort of like a connected family in a way, like it feels like another family that I have, and people who actually genuinely care about me, and it feels good,
What CCA means to us now, I think, it's hard to put into words sometimes. I think we just feel more connected, and we feel like we have a purpose, and we feel not so alone.
CCA saved my marriage. I don't think anybody can ever believe just how much stuff I was going through in my life, personal stuff with my dad and with my wife now, Kim. It was leading to a life of destruction. And, when we came, I don't think I've ever seen a group of people love another group of people in my entire life the way CCA loves people. So, it's really saved my marriage, it's saved my life. I mean, I can't, this is my home away from home, so.
So we'd been at Alachua Elementary for a year and a half. We had grown.
Desperate.
We were maxed out. We were sitting on metal folding chairs with cushions we had put our logo on. We were just, the ushers, bless their hearts, they would come in, literally bring a set of clothes to change into because they had sweated in the clothes they were wearing. So they had to change clothes before service even began. So it was, they were good, they were fine, but I could just see it was time for something. We needed something. We were coming up on Easter, and the only place that we really could house enough people to have one service at one time was Santa Fe High School. And we always heard it was a closed door, but I said, surely for Easter, just Easter, they'll let us go in there and have at least one service on Easter, and then we'll come back to Alachua Elementary. And so I called, talked to Mr. Smith, and he just told me immediately, he said, there's just no way. The principal's not going to do it. He doesn't allow churches to come in here. It's not going to happen, not even for just one service. It's not even an open door, so I'm not even going to ask him for you.
And deep down, I would get along with God, and I would constantly remind myself, you do all things well. You do all things well. There's always a reason. There's always a purpose. I don't see it. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But there's always a purpose, and there's always a reason.
No church has ever met in Santa Fe High School like we have, and really it's been closed to the outside community for a long time because of the current principal that was there. But in 2012, they got a different principal, and the atmosphere was changing.
So I just made another phone call and I, said, is there any way that I can set up an appointment for my husband, for our pastor and our youth pastor to come and talk to the principal? And they said, sure.
We prayed that morning, and I took Jay with me, and we went over, and I wanted him to be in that meeting. I wanted him to hear this. I wanted him to be a part of this. And so we went over and we met, and we weren't sitting down in front of her desk 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And I just basically laid it all out, and I just said, look, here's where we're at, and here's what we want to do, and we really believe in the community and want to partner with the community, and is it even possible? And she threw her pen down and said, absolutely. So when we walked in the auditorium and I saw 725 seats. Cushioned seats. And a sloped floor, a massive stage. I went back in the back and saw this little dimmer lighting pack that looks like it's 1,000 years old, but I just about cried. I said, we can create a worship experience like we've always wanted. It was just, it was a moment where God proved himself faithful again.
And I'll never forget the day in the office when they came back and they were just so excited. They said, we got the building, and we were able to move into Santa Fe a little bit later, but we were so excited that day. I mean, we were just all jumping around, going crazy.
She said we're good to go. It couldn't have went any better, and just how from the get-go it was a God thing. And we're literally, it's a dance party in that place. Like we're going nuts. We're going crazy.
It was an incredible day because we knew what that meant. We knew what, we were going from something so much smaller to something so much bigger.
Man, this is God. And then Pastor Mark's like, all right, so December 1st, I want our first service to be in there starting in December. And we're all like, what? All right, yeah, we're still like, okay, dance party, this is a God thing. Thinking in the back of our minds like, man, that's 4 weeks away. What are we gonna do? We have so much we have to do in 4 weeks. But at the same time, it pumped us up so much that we were just motivated to get it done.
This is how God moves. That we're able to have a facility bigger than what we originally were going to build for a quarter of the cost. That's God. God's dream is always bigger. God's vision is always bigger.
Where we are now, looking back to those staff meetings that we had in 2008, we so get it now why we had to push and why we had to work and why we just really had to surrender everything to God. If we would have blown up what we expected in 2008 to 2009 and just blew out the walls and just really grew, we wouldn't be who we are today. Our church wouldn't be who we are today. We wouldn't have had the systems and the organization and really the identity that we have today. Love God, love people, serve others might not have ever happened. Our name in the community might not have ever happened because we would have just been so focused on, handling the growth that God had sent us. But because He didn't send that to us right away, we were able to really focus on, God, what do you want for this church? I'm so grateful now looking back that He didn't give us what we thought we wanted.
Whatever happens from this day forward, I am completely convinced and know beyond a shadow of a doubt, based on the things that we know in the past, God's hand is on CCA, that God is going to provide for this church, that God already has a plan for where He wants us to be and for what He wants us to do. We just have to be patient, stay faithful, and keep doing what God said do. And if we do, He'll provide.